I just wanted to start by saying that welcoming everybody that's come into the room, but also the people who are watching online. We are going to be talking about the menopause today, so for anybody who did only see the title and have just wandered in by accident, please, you still have a chance to leave for the next 30 seconds. So I'd like to welcome both my guests today. We're going to be discussing the menopause, so I'll hand over to Clio first to introduce herself briefly.
I am a retired doctor. My menopause was quite a long time ago, but I only actually got rid of all my symptoms last year. So it's been quite a not an unusually long journey, actually. So basically, I think that's probably me.
I'm Anita Powell. I am feels like an AA meeting. I'm perimenopause, and I'm a community worker and a menopause activist. And my narrative is predominantly supporting and talking about women from lower social economic groups and ethnic minorities around menopause.
Thanks, Anita. Good to have you both. And from my own perspective, I'm going to be chairing this panel, but also participating in the discussion. I'm sure most of you do know me. I'm one of the QED organisers, but I'm also on my own sort of menopause journey as a perimenopausal woman. So we're going to be talking about our own kind of experiences as we go through this panel today. So thank you very much for joining us. Like I said, we're going to be talking about the menopause and try and address some of the real lack of understanding, some of the common misunderstandings, and try and bring a bit more enlightenment into everyone's world. So I will try and stop for a question sort of halfway through, so do get your thinking caps on, and hopefully we'll have time to squeeze some questions in at the end as well. So, bless you. So, Clio, if I can come to you first then, can you actually just clarify what it is, what is it that we mean when we say menopause?
All right, I'll try and keep it really brief. What the menopause literally means cessation of periods, and the medical definition of that is exactly 1 year after your last period. So it's a diagnosis that can only ever be made in retrospect. And after that, you're postmenopausal. However, there's an awful lot more to it than that, because obviously the perimenopause is the period where it all happens. And that's usually the 5 years before your periods stop, and obviously they're that first year that they've stopped. The average age is about 51, but 1 in 100 women under the age of 40 and 1 in 1,000 women under the age of 30 are menopausal. And the youngest that I know of it, not somebody I know personally, but I know of, is 14. So it's not that uncommon in younger people.
Thanks, Clio. And of course, just because someone's stopped having periods as well, it doesn't mean that their symptoms have gone away either. They can continue for much, much longer. So we're talking about, and we'll come back to the fact that this is a really huge part of a person's life. It's not just a few years, a few hot flushes. It is a substantial proportion of a woman's life. So I'd just like to take a very quick straw poll, actually, in the audience about sort of test your knowledge after lunch. I hope you're not too sleepy. So can anybody please stick your hand up if you know that hot flushes is a symptom of perimenopause or menopause? Okay, that's most of you. What about low mood or anxiety? Okay, lots of you. Okay, what about brain fog or memory problems? Okay, what about joint pain? Okay, less of you on that one. What about another symptom shall we throw out?
I don't know, I was just amused that my husband put his hand up there for knowing about all of them.
That's cheating. That's basically cheating, Malcolm. So actually, there are over 30 symptoms that are associated with perimenopause, with menopause. And, they're often occurring simultaneously. So it's not just the odd hot flush here and there, that kind of cliche, that trope for women that they're just fanning themselves constantly. I did note that the aircon in here today is very, very strong. So thank you for that in advance. But I'm sure that, the three of us would be very happy to talk a bit more about what some of those symptoms are after this panel. But if I can come to you, Anita. So, bearing in mind the complexity of what we're talking about here in your community work, in your activism, how do you find those interactions? Are people generally knowledgeable? What are they aware of? Is there any? What are those barriers to people finding out about what's happening to them?
Well, I've been doing menopause inclusion within my community work for about 4 years. So the journey over the past 4 years has been quite interesting. So the majority of the population, if you said to them perimenopause, they'll either run out the room or say, what on earth was that 4 years ago? Whereas now it's everywhere. So the conversation has dramatically evolved in a very short period of time. The conversation 4 years ago was what was it? And therefore the discussions were really very simple and the solutions were virtually none. Conversations now, a lot of people know what the menopause is. They don't necessarily know it in detail. They might not even know that they're going through the menopause. But solutions are less, but there are solutions. Some of the solutions are chargeable. So for the community area I work in, it's not really accessible for people who can't even afford their rent or mortgage or their meal for the week. They can't afford loads of stuff around health.
So I mean, it's really positive to hear that people are, increasing their awareness. There is more general sort of understanding of, menopause, perimenopause, that they're more common words now. But I don't know, I think that there still seems to be such a taboo around talking about this, or that it seems mad that only in 4 years, in the last few years, this is even a topic that seems to have been worth speaking about or worth having a conversation about, because it seems for so long it's been such a taboo in general conversation. And I wanted to get both your thoughts really on why you think that is. I've got some ideas of my own, but I'd be interested to hear why you think that it has been such a difficult topic for people to discuss.
I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm a community worker, so I've just made up a theory. Yes.
We love a made-up theory, let's have it. We can we can test it in the room, Anita.
I'm going back a long time ago to cavemen times, when the average person died in their 30s. So menopause was not applicable. And I think a lot of gender, sexism, relationship roles, the foundation started then, but menopause was not part of that foundation. So I don't know when it appeared, because I don't know when the average woman started to live to their late 40s and 50s, but I think it lost a whole area of dialogue. And I think that dialogue was very important in the foundation of who we were as humans. But that's what I've just made up. I'm sure someone's going to disagree with me. There's a second theory, and that's about healthcare, misogyny, and some men might disagree with me, but it's really about misogyny and healthcare, but also it's connected to my theory of cavemen in that as well. I like cavemen.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go along with your second one, and I think that really is that a decent woman does suffer in silence. And actually the stereotype of the old lady wrapped up, clutching her back is something you laugh at rather than have it's and you're meant to be like that. You're not meant to rock the boat and make a fuss, and which is why you mentioned Davina. One of the something I've heard which goes along with your theory is when women go along and ask for support for the menopause, one of the things I've heard is, oh gosh, she just wants to look like Davina.
Really?
Which is such a, I mean, it couldn't look like Davina if I tried, I mean, let's get serious. It's not about looking like, is it?
No. I think we'll just touch on that briefly, because I don't know if anyone in the room's seen Davina McCall's 2 documentaries she's made about the menopause. They are really worth watching and very well done, I would say, personal opinion. So I think that has genuinely changed a lot of the conversation and brought it into the fore a lot more. But I think for me, one of the sort of on my own journey, and I think actually I was starting to experience symptoms in my late 30s and not really knowing, just sort of random things and not really thinking too much about it. But then I went on some menopause training at work. I'm sort of a menopause champion in my role at work. And I had a bit of a ping light bulb moment and thought, okay, I've got a collection of things. This isn't one thing. It isn't just stress. It isn't just this thing over here. These are related things. And I think that, you know, to get to that point and to not have even known what was going to what was happening to me, understanding that, you know, I would experience menopause at some point in my life, but to not even know what to look out for, I find incredibly shocking, and it makes me really angry, actually. And I think that, you know, so much of that is tied up in shame and embarrassment as well about the sorts of symptoms that women experience during this transition in their lives, because it's not just the hot flushes and, you know, there's physical symptoms, but there's some real mental health issues that go along with fluctuating hormones. You know, the estrogen is active in every sort of cell of your body, and the fact that these hormones are now fluctuating so substantially affects every part of your body. And the fact that, you know, and that can be things like, you know, vaginal issues. It can mean women are slightly less continent. It can mean that so there's, you know, there's embarrassing physical symptoms alongside also some really emotional and mental health struggles that women can experience in this time, and there's a lot of shame and embarrassment attached to those things. And I think that, you know, we have to sort of change that conversation and make sure that we keep talking about it. And I don't know if, you know, as you say, in your work, Anita, in working with perhaps different communities, people from different backgrounds, how more accentuated those problems are in those circumstances.
Can I also add as well, I find that the conversation around menopause, partly the reason why it's embarrassing is because it contradicts, I suppose, the feminist narrative is that don't judge women being less of a person because of our gender. And then we have this health issue which is disabling, which is related to our gender. And I think there's this contradiction there for a lot of women to kind of internalise. I can't tell people I'm struggling because I'm a woman, because I'll be penalised for it.
Yeah.
And I can't accomplish the job effectively because of my gender. But within the third sector, the community sector, I think a lot of the disabling element of menopause is actually a lack of knowledge and a lack of support. And also a lot of older women within the lower social demographics are physical carers on a low income. So they can't kind of give people their children. So they might be caring for the elderly and caring for their children and maybe working a part-time job. They can't give their job because that's a key part of paying their bills. They don't have access to paid resources. They can't afford to go to the gym. They can't afford to pay for nutritionists. If they don't get good National Health Service medication or help or support for their doctor, they can't go private. So they're disabled on many levels, and they have to deal with the idea where they just got to get on with it. They're a carer. And the lack of education means they don't know what they're going through, and they can't share it with the people around them.
I think to add to that, though, some of the things that you're going to need to share, I mean, how do you go along as an older woman to a young male GP and say that you had to pull over at Sainsbury's because your car began to look like a murder site because you were flooding, which is not an uncommon problem, and it can get really bad? Or how do you go along and say to that same young man, well, I thought I wanted sex with my husband, but nothing happened below, so I was just a bit... I mean, here's me using euphemisms in a... So how is somebody going to say that to the young GP? It's not easy. If it's not easy for someone like myself, how much harder must it be for somebody from a different background?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it affects work as well. You have the same dialogue with HR.
Yeah.
You tell HR that you're flooding.
Yeah.
I'd like at this point, if anyone's got a question from the audience, I'm happy to take a quick question. You are first with your hand up, sir.
Two quick ones.
Well, you can have one.
Okay. You said 51. Was that for the menopause or peri-menopause?
So 51 is the average age of menopause.
Right. And what should men do and what should men not do in relation to?
Well, I'd like to think we're going to come on to that. So can we park that question until a little bit later, if that's okay? Has anybody else got a question? I'm gonna look over to this room. Oh yes, Julie, would you like to? Lady with the pink hair.
I know very little about menopause. I was
okay.
wondering, how long does it typically last?
So well, would anyone else like to answer that question?
I mean, the textbook answer is perimenopause is around 5 years, but the actual answer is it can be a lot shorter or a lot longer.
I'm not sure I understand the difference between perimenopause
Right.
and menopause.
So the definition of menopause is a year after your last period.
So it's 1 day. Menopause is medically 1 day. So that's the year anniversary that a person's period stops. The menopause is 1 day. So actually, all of the symptoms that's when they start, you're perimenopausal, you have the menopause, which is 1 day, and then you're postmenopausal. And in all of this time, these symptoms can be happening to you. So it can be 20 years, potentially,
So,
it can vary a lot.
It will creep up. So the first thing you notice is that you're sitting in a meeting doing this. I don't think there's a woman who's not over a certain age who's not sat in a meeting and done that. And night sweats is the other thing that I think very, very, very common you notice. And then the other things creep up on you because it's a bit of brain fog, which is a testosterone thing, or it's your mood. People's mood can drop, or you can get joint pains or muscle pains, or almost every. So estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone affect every cell in your body. And I think that one of the biggest disservices that we've done is calling testosterone as if it's a male hormone. Women make more testosterone than they do estrogen or progesterone. And estrogen, testosterone, progesterone affect every cell in your body. They're not... Calling them sex hormones, I think, is the other big disservice that we do everybody. They're far more than just sex hormones. They do a lot of really important stuff.
Have you got anything to add, Anita? And then we'll come back to some more questions at the end, I think.
With regards to the age, according to some stats I've read, I haven't done research personally, ethnic minorities go through menopause earlier and it can last longer, and we don't know why.
No. So I think that's the key takeaway, is that there's a really varied for everyone that's going to go through this, and there's no one size fits all. And I think hopefully we'll come on to talk a little bit more about what we can perhaps do about that in our next sort of section. But I really wanted to try and just move on then to talk a little bit about, we've talked about touched on briefly the myriad of symptoms, the fact that it's quite challenging for people to get help. Women don't generally know about this stuff. We don't know that these things are going to happen to us. We don't know what to look out for. We don't know what the signs are. The people in our lives don't know necessarily what to look out for. So I was hoping that we might be able to maybe just share some of our own experiences and talk a little bit about, if maybe you're getting a collection of symptoms and you're thinking, something's not quite right, I don't know what it is. First stop, you might go to your GP. But from talking to other women, their experiences of going to the GP, again, can be quite varied. And I wondered if you might like to share perhaps an experience of going to your GP and how different that might have been.
I am exceptionally privileged. So by the time I went to my GP about it, I was already a very senior doctor. And I'm told I can be a bit intimidating. So I got exactly what I wanted. I had an argument with him about the nice guidelines and what they actually meant. But most people are not in a position to be able to do that.
No.
And it was something I had to psych myself up for. And I still, in the end, at the age of 64, I thought, sod this. When this guy was phoned me up he'd given up trying to take me off the one I was on, and I knew that the medication I was on actually increases your risk of breast cancer from something like 23 in 1,000 to 27 in 1,000. I wasn't worried about that, but I thought I should change on something good. I wasn't going to even discuss it with him. It wasn't worth it. So I paid to go privately. It was £400, and I was, yeah.
That's the right response.
So exactly, I was fortunate that I had the money to do that, and that was something I thought was worthwhile. I was changed onto a new medication. This was the revelation to me. I used to sleep with ibuprofen by the bed. I used to wake up every night with really, really bad pains, and I thought it was because of what the other things I do in my life, and I just accepted it. I mean, it's what you do. I used to wake him up by stretching and trying. A month after going to my new medication, and then I increased it because the nice person I saw said, titrate it, find the right dose for you. I stopped waking up at night. Now, I was 64. I'd been menopausal for over more than 10 years. So it's really, it's not, as Nicola said, this is not this happens and then it's over with. And we haven't even talked about the other awful things that happen to women.
I think, for me, the journey around menopause has been a combination of things. So it's working and talking to women of a similar age and hearing what they said, which influenced what I did and what I thought. I went to the doctor and I had anxiety, very snappy, still am, but I'm proud of it now. I tell people I won the menopause group, don't mess with me.
Intimidating is good.
It does. I get away with murder, but I haven't though. So a combination of anxiety, my sleeping was terrible because I was so hot at night. Lack of sleep then aggravates what you're like the next day. So it aggravates your emotional state of mind. I also had things around joint pain, loads of things. Constant dry eyes, which apparently is relating to, the overall drying up of your, feminine body, but we don't need to go into that. So it was a combination of the things for me. When I went to my GP wasn't taken seriously at all. I didn't have your experience at all. And also I have the unfortunate disadvantage, I'm overweight. So they don't like to prescribe any medication of that type to people who are overweight because it affects the hormone levels when you're overweight and things like that, so it doesn't work. So my GP basically said, lose weight, which is harder when you're menopausal, and then come back, which actually it doesn't help because when you're overweight, all the increased areas which relate to menopause increasing with regards to diabetes, heart stuff, and all kinds of things which are amplified with menopause. When you're overweight, they're amplified anyway. So actually, you need more support, even if it's not medical. You need more guidance. And the GP, within 9 minutes of my appointment, sent me out, and that's it. It's over. They don't talk to you about it again. They don't deal with it because you haven't eliminated that barrier.
No. I think, I feel more lucky than lots of other women that I've talked to about this thing. So obviously I've talked to, there's a menopause support group at work. I'm very lucky. I've had sort of access to talking to other women, which has been incredibly helpful for me because I knew nothing about what was happening to me. But hearing other women's stories and, the fact that you, as you say, Anita, maybe you're pushed out of the GP surgery, you're not really taken seriously as a woman, perhaps even as a black woman, that those sort of preconceptions about how women can tolerate certain pain or certain conditions, and therefore you're sort of fobbed off. But also, I think there's a real lack of specialism in GPs as well. It's not, I think that's changing now with the conversation, but, menopause is sort of like some ad hoc course that GPs, used to take. It wasn't a routine thing that people were taught about, so there seems to be a bit of a, it's a cliche to say now, I suppose, but a real postcode lottery in terms of access to help at GPs. Some clinics have menopause nurses there is specialism in GP surgeries, but that is certainly not universal. HRT, there's been a bit of a crisis in HRT in terms of availability. It's not widely available in all areas. I went to the GP first. And, I cried and was upset because I was told, well, you're over 40. Are you stressed? Of course I'm stressed. I'm over 40. Why asking me that question? And I left crying and then just sort of saying, oh, well, you could have HRT, but, there's increased breast cancer risk. That was the first thing that was said to me. And that was by a female GP as well. I had to go back and basically give them a list of all of the things that I was experiencing and saying, I think this is perimenopause. I am miserable. Can you help me? And So I was lucky that I pushed, and then I'm in an area where I've been able to get HRT. But I know so many women, older women than me, they go to their GPs. They're told you're not old enough. In their late 40s, you're not old enough because perhaps of overhangs of ideas that you're given HRT once you've experienced menopause, not actually that you're expected to suffer and tolerate years and years of symptoms before you're even allowed to have treatment. And the last thing I will say on this is that, again, women being vastly misdiagnosed, because one of the huge symptoms of perimenopause is low mood, depression, anxiety, real mental health issues. And so often women are just fobbed off with antidepressants. And that might be part of the treatment that women need. It is not necessarily the fix that people need in that situation. It might be that it's hormonal, it's not depression related. And so there's a huge, again, it's that sense of having to keep going back, having to battle almost to get the right sort of treatment. Anita, please come in.
Oh, God, my brain's gone blank. One thing, I was going to mention two things, but one thing I mentioned, with regards to working with low socioeconomic groups, I remember both things now. So one of the obstacles for low socioeconomic groups is that if they do go to a GP, and some GPs are lovely, some are stubborn, nothing against you. But somebody who hasn't got a degree, low socioeconomic person, goes into a doctor and tells the doctor how to medicate them, sometimes the response is microaggression.
Indeed,
And sometimes, I think it's better now, but some people experienced hostility from the doctor, being told how to medicate them. So that's one thing. Two, there was another issue around QOF list. Was it QOF list?
Quality of frame. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one.
Yes. So this is what I've heard, gossip. Yeah, because I'm not a doctor. So one of the issues that existed was also the fact that menopause is not on this QOF list, and doctors get additional funding if they treat someone on this list. But menopause is not on the list, but depression is. So there's also a theory that some people, they go in, and especially the lower socioeconomic group, they don't want to treat menopause because they earn more money by treating depression. But that's just gossip.
It's not actually. It's not actually thought of. There still isn't. I don't think there's anywhere on the medical curriculum that I know of where menopause is actually discussed. It's certainly not part of obs and gynae. It isn't, because obs and gynae is about fertility or about neoplasm, about cancer or serious ill. It's not about. It's not about menopause. But menopause is everything. I mean, you talked about low mood. It may well be if someone goes to a GP age 45 and they're having palpitations, you can't have a test for. Is it worth mentioning that now?
Well, we can come back to it.
Okay, I'll come back to that. But it's. So you go to one good thing about I've been involved in medical school training, and one thing that's very much part of the curriculum now is shared decision making, better communication skills, all the kind of things that were certainly never taught when I was at uni. So that's a huge improvement. But what you were saying, recognising the right disease. So are your palpitations, if you're 45? Could they be menopause? Your brain fog, could that be menopause? Your brittle bones, could they be menopause? Almost anything is worth considering, and it's not like when we were younger and the doctor always said, "Could you be pregnant?" No. Do you remember? Every woman's got irritated with being asked that. Actually, asking a woman in her 40s, "I wonder if this is menopause," is not going to be like that at all. That would be a very sensible question.
I think, though, just touching briefly, I think part of why there's been so much difficulty in addressing this is because there's that. I always feel like, coming back to your starting caveman point, Anita, that idea that women, it's a natural process that people go through, periods stop. Therefore, you kind of have to just get on with it, but also that internalised kind of misogyny. Well, that women are there to be fertile and to produce babies, and once that process stops, it's kind of you passed it and, they just kind of forgotten about. And I think that kind of all of that does definitely feed into the lack of conversation, the lack of understanding. It's kind of keep withholding that knowledge actually from women to help them make those decisions. And I feel like maybe the tide is starting to turn a little bit, but there's still a huge amount of work to do. I think, very conscious of time, I'd like us to just touch on, before we wrap up and try and squeeze in some questions, is we've kind of skirted around treatments and what can we do, and how can people around us kind of understand these things. One thing that I wanted to kick off in terms of treatment, so we haven't said HRT out loud, but HRT is a huge part of this conversation, is that about 30 years ago there was a study from a Women's Health Initiative study that was done in the US in the early 90s, and it was a study that brought headlines around increased risks. Women's risk of breast cancer is substantially increased by taking HRT. These kind of really, really worrying headlines. And, I feel like in reflecting about that, it's almost an analogous to the impact that something like Andrew Wakefield and the MMR scandal had on healthcare outcomes. So, the study itself wasn't as problematic, obviously, as that study, but what I mean is the impact that it had on women's health, because for the last 30 years, those thoughts, those ideas about, well, HRT increases your risk of breast cancer is sort of almost been the prevailing attitude or understanding for most women, and that has meant that women don't go and seek help. They don't, maybe it's not prescribed. There's this hangover of that study, which actually was just quite flawed and wasn't quite right. So, that has led to so many women not actually accessing HRT in the way that they maybe could do. And I think that definitely the medicines have improved substantially as well in the last 30 years. We were talking about the combined HRT back in the early 90s. Now modern HRT is body identical HRT, body identical hormones, so the treatments are very different. So I just thought, can we have a conversation about what kind of treatments are out there, maybe what is out there that women, from like an alternative medicine point of view, or out there that don't necessarily help, what we can say about that, and talk about testosterone as well. You mentioned testosterone, Clio. I think we should talk about that.
So if I just to be really, really brief, first of all, the way that I get my head around the fact that everybody's different, which they are, is just thinking of every woman in this room will have had different experience of periods. Some will have had mood swings, some will have been absolutely fine, some will have had physical symptoms. Everyone's completely different, which means that we do respond differently to hormones. However, there is a standard treatment now for HRT, body identical estrogen with a separate body identical progesterone. And for most people, that's actually going to be the right thing, but not for everybody. That really doesn't suit everybody. Some people, I have one friend who's on a not testosterone, but a similar-ish drug, and to her that's the answer. Other people can't tolerate any hormones, and we do know there's a lot of evidence that diet and exercise, as with everything, can make a very big difference to menopause symptoms. The other thing is testosterone. It's only licensed, I don't know what you're going to make of this, it's only licensed for women for one reason, and that's low libido. And yet, a number of the symptoms that you were talking about, brain fog, low mood, are testosterone related, not estrogen related. So actually, testosterone should be part of the general overall balancing package for all women. I have a friend who is a cancer nurse, and she struggles to get testosterone for the women in their 30s who've had a medical menopause. And they're in their 30s, and she struggles to get them HRT, never mind testosterone, which they need even more than someone of my age obviously does. So that's...
I mean, with regards to testosterone, from my perspective, because I work with a lot of women from different ethnic minority groups, they culturally just can't go to a doctor and tell them they've got a low libido. They just can't, and therefore they don't get treatment because from what I understand, because I'm just a community worker, from what I understand, if you don't use the language of I have a low libido, you're not prescribed a medication.
Yeah. And I think, and to make it clear as well, so you can go to your GP, and if hopefully they're a good GP, they're an understanding GP, they should be able to prescribe you estrogen and progesterone as part of your HRT treatment, but they cannot prescribe testosterone. So you have to go through another level of waiting list and go to a menopause clinic to be able to even have the conversation with somebody who can prescribe you testosterone. So for example, in Liverpool, where I live, the waiting list is a year to see the menopause clinic, and I'm sure that is the same across the country. There are, really, really long waiting lists. But, these are issues that are really quite debilitating for women. So, having to wait, as everything, obviously, but, these are, it seems so restrictive that there is not, you have to go through this extra hurdle of getting a treatment that could actually really be transformative to your daily life, that it's just not that readily acceptable because for whatever reason there's not been enough research, there's not been enough money thrown at the problem, that it's seen as a male hormone, not a female hormone, and therefore sort of less important, I guess. I wondered if you'd both come across any sort of alternative, medical treatments or anything like that, because like with any health issue, there are always things that pop up that maybe purport to say to do things that they actually can't do. Have you ever come across any of those things or any treatments that if the people you work with can't afford maybe treatment, they try an alternative?
Can I also mention in connection to what you've said, over the past 4 years, one of the things I've noticed is the private sector has multiplied tenfold, while the National Health Service has multiplied by onefold. So there are loads of businesses out there, which some I presume work, because they work in the whole, the basis is if holistically, if you're healthier, you can manage all health conditions better. So I'm not an expert, but if you say running 40 miles a day is good for your menopause, I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't know. If you say, taking certain vitamins and whatever, it's not my area of expertise, but I'm not going to argue it's not my expertise. But I know that from my work, I have to signpost and I have to highlight areas of concern. So a lot of women of colour don't trust HRT. They don't trust all this medication because they're often not included in the tests. And also apparently there are different hormone levels related to ethnicity, which are not taken into consideration when the tests are done, apparently. I don't know. But and also there's loads of things which are apparently not taken into consideration when the tests are done. So a lot of women from diverse communities apparently have high reaction to some of the medication. And I do know those women who've fainted and have had polyps, and stuff like that, and they've had to come loads of bleeding because of HRT, and they're more likely to be a person of colour. So I know one particular person I had to sit down with because she refused to take HRT, but she's paying loads of money for something called yam juice. And it was a cultural thing from Africa, which apparently something to do with menopause medication, something to do with yam, apparently. I don't know.
The current what I would regard as the gold standard treatment is actually made from yams.
Yeah. So someone had manipulated that concept and said, with Africa, this is a historical thing, cultural thing, take that instead. Now, I don't know what's in this yam juice. You had to pay monthly for this yam juice. I know nothing about it. But I'd advised her to go to a nutritionist because also, as a person of colour and a menopausal woman, you have to be conscious of your sugar levels around diabetes. So I said, well, yam's got loads of sugar. Don't just take it and presume it's going to address your issues. Go to someone who's an expert around food and get them to look into it. So that's what I do because I'm not a medical person. I can't do anything more.
There definitely seems to be an if you're going to Holland and Barrett or Boots or anywhere like that, lots of products aimed with menopause written on them, to be able to say, well, to take this to address hot flushes or, whatever myriad of symptoms. But, I think definitely the research points to that if you are going to take something, then HRT is the safest and most effective for most women. Obviously, not every woman, but for most women, that is going to be the thing that is going to alleviate symptoms the most, because anything that you can buy over the counter as well isn't probably going to have, it might say it's bioidentical. That's a phrase that's cropped up, bioidentical hormones, but the actual proper HRT is body identical hormones. Very similar sounding, but it can be misleading and give people the wrong impression that they're taking something natural, that they're taking something that is mimicking hormones, but it's not. It's not the actual right thing.
I've got a rule of thumb. If you want to buy anything that's got the prefix meno, be it a face cream or a tablet, that's fine as long as you want to pay 20% more for something that's not going to do you any more better.
I think we are very, very rapidly running out of time, so I'd like to squeeze in a couple of questions if I can. Oh, gosh.
Wait for the microphone.
Oh, okay.
They can't hear any.
Okay, so there was a lady very desperate to ask a question there. Can you please make it succinct, then we can squeeze a couple in.
We're talking about mostly bad symptoms, things that make life more difficult. Mm-hmm. Are there any lighter sides for menopause?
Sex without getting pregnant?
You can wear white jeans every single day.
Yes, sure.
Are there like blood tests or anything?
So there is a thing there is a thing called FHS levels, and that can be tested. There has been an explosion in over the counter. You can go and buy a test kit in Boots, or you can buy one online. They vary in price, but we're talking about a time when hormones are fluctuating up and down, and they do that naturally anyway. So actually, FSH level testing kits are basically not worth the money that they're printed on. I think. To mangle a phrase, I think actually, you all got what I meant. I think fundamentally, the best way of diagnosing whether someone is experiencing perimenopause or menopause is looking at the symptoms, being able to identify and know what the symptoms are, knowing your body, knowing what's different, and looking holistically and saying this is a collection of things that are different, and that is how someone would get a diagnosis. Lizzie, I see your hand. Oh, okay, go.
I think it's pretty much already been answered, but how do you diagnose it in a woman that is on birth control that stops their periods?
So yeah, it's about understanding what the symptoms are really, and recognising that there are so many different symptoms to perimenopause, and being able to hopefully have an understanding doctor that can recognise that all of the multiple things that are happening, aren't well, it's not palpitations, therefore I need a heart tablet. It's not, depression, therefore I need antidepressants. It might be a collection of symptoms.
And you can be perimenopausal on birth control and HRT. It's not mutually exclusive. I think there is no test for the menopause. It's not possible to test for. You can test your estrogen levels after you're on estrogen to make sure you're absorbing the cream enough, but you can't test for it beforehand. The only thing is suck it and see. It's so safe is estrogen. The body identical, the one that goes through your skin so it doesn't go through your liver when you take it. It's so safe that the best test is take this, does it help? It's just because you're prescribed it for a trial doesn't mean say you're stuck on it for the rest of your life. You can take it for a few months. You say, actually, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, well, then that's not the right thing to do. And it's always worth a trial.
Can I also mention as well that sometimes people are put on the Mirena coil for their menopause, which is also a contraception?
Actually, the Mirena coil just to add to that, Mirena coil is progesterone. It is, if you have a uterus, it's a good reason to be on progesterone as well as estrogen, and you can have it you can have a Mirena coil and take your estrogen, and some people prefer that than having to take a pill every day. It's an option, but not on its own.
Lizzie.
how do medical treatment services need to change so that women do not have to fight through for treatment?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
It's to be honest, it's
part of
not
my job. So.
right. It's not so much the ground levels. It's the directions from above that is the problem. So GPs are told what they can and they can't do. So the private clinic I went to was the Newsom Health Clinic in Stratford. And their working model, I think, is absolutely excellent. And if what they are doing is they're training up local people to do the same kind of thing, but it's all private. And like I said, it cost me £400 to do it. That is a really simple model, and the woman who runs that, Louise Newsom, who runs that team, says this shouldn't be private. This is really simple stuff. GPs are prescribing massively toxic medications, and this is not toxic. It's one of the safest medications there is. GPs should be empowered and able to prescribe it. It should be on the quality outcome framework. If they did that, solved.
Is there anything you would like to see, Anita, you think that would help benefit the communities that you work with, that would make that, open that door?
I mean, the thing is that doctors are trained. The level of training now is a lot better, and a lot of doctors invest. Surgeries invest now in training. I know once upon a time it wasn't the case. I know loads of places are developing menopause clinics, but I actually think in the future they'll be out of date because GPs will be trained and therefore they holistically can deal with multiple health issues as well as menopause. So I think actually menopause clinics once was the idea that'll be the solution, but I think in the long term it might disappear.
Okay, I'm going to try and squeeze in maybe one, maybe two questions. So, Linda, did you have an idea of who was hand up first?
First time I've heard anything really about menopause, so thank you. Oh, sorry. Sorry. What can workplaces do to be more inclusive?
Oh, gosh.
Listen, be compassionate, and train the staff to kind of hear women's icky stuff, because the reality is a lot of women suffer with their, female issues, and a woman's not going to go to a HR department that can't listen. They're just not. It doesn't matter how many policies you have. If you've got to talk to Fred and he just can't handle, you can't handle the ickiness. They're just not going to talk to Fred, no matter what policies there.
Yeah. Hopefully that's not offending any Freds in the room. I mean, certainly from a work perspective. So at work, I am the chair of the Gender Equality Network. I am a trained menopause champion. That was paid for me. Had an external provider come in and just help us. Identify some of the stats, some of the issues that women face. We're talking about here a period of women's lives that maybe, 20 years. Like I say, if I'm in my early 40s, I'm experiencing these symptoms, I might have to work, well, probably till death at this rate, but but certainly into my 60s. That's a really long time to be going through these things, and you're absolutely right. Workplaces need to step up and support people. So having talking networks, being able to have that community, so that we can share all of this stuff and things, but also maybe pushing for that change so that workplace policies are kept up to date as well. So, for example, in my work, a trial thinking about bringing in menopause leave, so that for an X number of days during the year, if you have symptoms or appointments specifically related to perimenopause, menopause, you can take that and it's not sickness, or you're not having to use annual leave. So things like that, I think, people just need to start talking about it and being able to understand these things, so that also, for those people around us, if you're a person who isn't going to experience menopause, but to just understand what these symptoms look like, so that you can talk to your mothers, your sisters, your work colleagues, and be understanding and help make the appropriate adjustments. Women might just need appropriate adjustments in the workplace. They might need to work from home more, or they might need a different type of desk, or they might need all of these things just to help make working so they continue to work and be effective, but not feel the embarrassment and the shame that goes along with not being able to remember stuff or needing to quickly dash to the toilet or all of these things that crop up as part of this. Yay. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. One more question. Sorry. Oh. Very, very, very quick, or else I'm going to get told off.
I have a million questions, but now just one for to end it. Sources for us to look up, because I came here thinking I knew a little bit about this. I understand I know very, very, very little now, and I want to look it up and I want to learn more.
Okay.
British Menopause Society, I would suggest.
Yeah. There is also there is an app called the Balance app. On the Balance app, it's free to download. It's got an awful lot of information on it. You can log your own symptoms, and you can discover that some of your symptoms are menopausal that you hadn't realised that they were. And I've got an article in The Skeptic.
Do you know the Menopause Manifesto, the book?
I have heard of it. I've not read it.
Myriad. Oh, yes. Oh, she's brilliant. I like her. Brilliant. I don't like everyone, but I like her.
And also, actually, Joyce Harper, who we've got tomorrow, she's not talking about the menopause specifically, but she has also, talked a lot about menopause and related symptoms as well. So she's definitely a good source of knowledge. I think we're definitely going to have to wrap it up. I'm really, really sorry. Thank you for your patience. If anyone wants to come and ask us questions at the end, I'm sure it'll be very welcome. But thank you very much.
Thank you.